Hey guys, Holt here, and this is my update for October the 7th. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the Joker, because as you know, yesterday, we're filming this on a Saturday, October the 4th, which was a Friday. The new Joker film came out, starring Joaquin Phoenix, produced by Martin Scorsese, co-starring Robert De Niro. I'd love to hear what you guys thought about the film. We're not going to talk about that specifically too much because the movie just came out. So, maybe we'll do a show about that Joker movie at some point. Yeah, when everyone's seen it, and you don't have to worry about spoiling and stuff like that. But today what we're going to talk about is how the character of the Joker has evolved through many incarnations, in many, many comic books, many films, many animated TV shows and
such
and
as
movies.
the Justice League from like the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, that no one has ever seen. I remember the old 80s action figure I used to have of the way he was drawn back then with the pinstripe pants and the purple and gray and everything. But let's jump right into this. Before I do that, let me also send out a shout out and a congratulations to William Enstone, the director and co-writer of Butcher's Bluff, a film I'm going to be in next year. The Indiegogo campaign started yesterday and was a huge success. So with 39 days left to go, I think they have a very small percentage of their target to ascertain. I think it made $11,000 yesterday or some such jazz. So that's great. Always good to see not just projects that I'm in, but projects of that ilk, get support from the fans. So now back to the Joker. Bill Finger. How's that for a name?
Yeah.
Bob Kane and Jerry Robinson. Three people who have all claimed to have created the Joker to one degree or another. Bob Kane is the creator of Batman, or at least the co-creator. The thing about Bob Kane is he was never very big into sharing credit on stuff. So he did he kind of took credit for a lot of stuff. One of the things he took credit for was creation solely of Batman and ultimately a year later of the Joker, because the Joker didn't come around until a year after Batman was created. Joker debuted in spring of spring of 1940, a long time ago, in the very first issue of a comic book called Batman. Now, Batman himself appeared in Detective Comics number 27, like I said, about a year before. And so Batman at this point had two comics. He had the Batman comic book named after him and Detective Comics. And the guy drawing the Batman comic was a guy named Jerry Robinson. Yeah,
he was a 17-year-old artist. And he wanted to create the supreme arch villain to Batman, or that's his story.
Right.
Yes.
That's his side of the coin.
Yes.
Bill Finger is the guy who has said that what he brought to the table was Conrad Veidt, the star of a 1928 movie called The Man Who Laughs.
And that was a German expressionistic film. And that's back when, the German movies rivaled the Hollywood movies.
Yeah. Before Goebbels.
Yes, correct. This was directed by, Paul Linney?
Yeah.
And it was a silent romantic melodrama. And it was about a blind woman who falls in love with a man who's disfigured, and his disfigurement is that he has a permanent smile on his face.
And he's creepy as hell. I don't know if you guys have ever seen photos of Conrad in that movie, but it is pretty. People have always thought that that's a horror film.
Yeah. Because
of how he looked, and it's a German expressionistic film, so it's kind of dark.
Yeah.
But it's not actually. It wasn't meant to be a horror film. It was meant to be this melodrama, like you were saying. But I tell you, you see some of those stills, and it looks pretty horrific to me. But if you look at that still of Conrad in that character, and then you look at how Joker was drawn, it's pretty obvious. Now, Bill Finger brought that to the table, a book that had a photograph of the actor in that character. Jerry Robinson has said that he brought to the table the idea of a Joker playing card, and that he wanted to have a character that would use a Joker playing card somehow. Now, according to Bob Kane, he says that him and Bill Finger came up with this all by themselves. To the day he died, he never gave Jerry Robinson a lick of credit. Not a lick of it. And Jerry Robinson was like, damn you, Kane, why do you always have to take credit for everything? You got Batman by yourself. But a lot of people do say that Jerry Robinson had a lot to do. He is the first person to draw the Joker. Mm-hmm. So that something must be said for that. They're all dead now, so we'll probably never know the truth.
They're battling it out in the afterlife.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, The Man Who Laughs. That was an interesting film. I remember seeing that long before I actually knew it was the inspiration for the Joker character. In hindsight, looking back, I'm like, well, of course it is. You know, the white skin, the rictus grin, the makeup. He has a silent film, so it's in black and white. He's got like black lips, so you could kind of see that as the red lips of the Joker. As I said before, this character debuted in Batman #1. And Finger, this is interesting because Bill Finger actually wanted to kill off the Joker.
Really?
In his very first appearance. Yeah, because he said that he felt that Batman would appear to be inept if he didn't stop the guy.
Yeah.
And the editor at the time, a guy named Whitney Ellsworth, said, no, you can't do that. Let's keep this going. It's a good thing that he did. So they like roughly drew in a final panel where, you know, Joker gets stabbed, because the original version of the Joker is he's a serial killer.
Yeah.
He's really homicidal, crazy fucking guy. And he gets stabbed. Well, in the very last panel of the issue, they just kind of pasted in there him saying, well, they think I'm dead, but I'm not really. I'll be back. And he did come back.
Yes.
He came back quite a few times.
That's right. And he actually appeared, was it 9 out of the first 12 issues of Batman comics.
So he was back almost immediately.
Yes.
Yeah, to get under Batman and Robin's skin again. Now, I said before, when he was introduced, he was a homicidal character. He started to lighten up a little bit. And the reason he did is because they wanted to market these books to younger audiences. If you think back to like the early Action Comics, the first appearance of Superman's throwing people off roofs. You know, he's got a gangster, he grabs him out, he throws them off fucking roof.
So, you know, like cartoons. You know, cartoons and comic books back then were made for adults. Mm-hmm. And then they realized we can sell a shit ton to kids and toys.
Mm-hmm. And so then the things started to get kind of light and watered down. And that's what happened to the Joker. Because pretty soon, as time was going on, you got the Joker becoming less of a homicidal maniac and more of like this prankster type dude. Kind of before that happened, because that didn't really happen until the Comics Code, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But Bill Finger was the first guy to write an origin story for the Joker. The first of many origin stories. But a lot of what he wrote in Detective Comics number 168 has stuck. Like, for instance, that the idea that the Joker was originally a criminal known only as the Red Hood. And he wore this like red dome over his head to cover his identity, and a cape and like a tuxedo. And that one time the Red Hood was trying to get through this chemical plant in order to rob a company on the other side, and Batman confronted him. And so the Red Hood jumped off the railing of this catwalk and fell into a vat of chemicals, and Batman thought he was dead. Batman was thinking, damn, I missed the opportunity to throw him in there. And so, but then he wasn't dead because he washed out and his skin was suddenly bleached white and his lips red and his hair green. This was expanded upon later in The Killing Joke by the great Alan Moore, which we'll talk about when we get more into like the 80s incarnation of the character. But Bill Finger is the guy who came up with those elements that have, regardless of how the origin has changed. And one of the greatest things to me tell me what you think about this, about the Joker in the comic book, is he doesn't have a set origin.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that that's really cool, and the idea that he's just mysterious and no one quite knows who he was before he became the Joker. You know, when they used to do, remember they used to do the comic book Who's Who? And you would have like the profile and their stats, and it would have like real name, colon, and for Joker, it was always real name, colon, unknown. You know, a lot can be said for that, I think, the mystery in a character like that. But anyway, many different times, versions of his story were told by himself and by other comic book writers. And a lot of them use the Red Hood element. And of course, almost all of them use the vat of chemicals. Bill Finger, thanks. One finger for you, Bill. 1954, the Comics Code Authority came about. And I say this through gritted teeth. They banned the use of gore, innuendo, and excessive violence, based primarily because of like horror comics at the time. Comics were taking a beating. And there were books like Tales from the Crypt and The Haunt of Fear, crime suspense stories, many other ones of that ilk. And those books were taking a beating by parents and really more by politicians who were saying, our youth are being corrupted. And if they keep reading these comic books, they're going to start killing each other. And so this spilled into all areas of the comic book world, including what was not at the time, what was at that time national, but what would become DC Comics. And that resulted in the Joker being even more watered down and made into a very goofy version of his former homicidal glory. I think it's safe to say that this culminated in the 1966 television show.
Oh, Cesar Romero.
Cesar Romero and his mighty mustache.
Yeah.
Cesar refused to shave his mustache. Because, you know, just because you got a job on television doesn't mean that suddenly you're not Cesar Romero anymore.
That's right.
He's a Latin heartthrob. And the few people know the very first Joker was played by a Latino. That's a forgotten point, but he was. Cesar Romero.
And he played him all 3 seasons of the Batman.
Which is unusual for that show.
Yeah.
Because remember, Riddler, it was Frank Gorshin.
Yeah.
And then the second season, it was John Ashton.
Yeah.
And then it became Frank Gorshin again. Yeah. And then, I mean, with Catwoman, how many? There was Julie Newmar.
Yeah.
There was Eartha Kitt. And then there was Lee Merriweather. Yeah. Who I met one time at a convention. Nice enough lady. Met Adam West, too. He gave me a look like, who do you think you are, pal? But he was in a lot of physical pain at the time and is out of commission now altogether. Rest in peace. So the new DC editor was a fellow named Julius Schwartz.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And he did not like the Joker.
How could you not
like? He didn't like it. Well, because I guess the way they changed him. So while he was there, the Joker was not in the comic book for 4 years. 4 years. 4 years, no Joker.
Can you imagine Batman for 4 years without Joker? Batman had that's the thing about Batman. He's sort of like Spider-Man. He's got a million great villains. You know, you think about the rogues gallery of certain characters like Superman. Not a lot. Not many. And I think maybe because at the essence, how do you make a villain that will stand up to Superman? Especially at this time when Superman could, like, you know, blow on a star and it would move it. You know, he was really powerful. He was crazy powerful. So how do you stop a guy like that? Or, you know, how do you fight a guy like that? Batman's just a normal dude. Yeah, that's it. That's about it. Lex, of course, and Lex used his brain. Yeah, you know, he didn't use his brawn. But you think of characters like Batman, who is essentially a guy. He's a guy, and he's kind of crazy.
A lot of baggage.
He's got a lot of baggage, but in a way relatable in that sort of, you know, because you look at everybody had bad things happen to him. Hopefully, not as many bad things as happened to that poor kid. But you know, and you go, he's really messed up. Now, granted, at this particular time in the '60s, there were a lot of, how do I put this? there were a lot of jokey kind of Batman and Robin things going on in the comics, which later have been ridiculed because essentially you do have Batman and a young boy living together, and camp, I guess, is the best way of putting it. And that has not, when you look back on that, it has not aged well. It looks really silly.
Yeah.
But when he began, and then the way he is now and how he eventually came back, Batman was always a really dark character. Even he waned in this time period when the Comics Code Authority and the television show were doing their thing. And I don't want to put down the 66 TV show because, look, I grew up, I used to watch reruns of that. I thought it was funny. Bang, zap, zoink, it's cool for kids.
Shark repellent.
But when you think of Batman, you don't really think of
No.
Adam West, zero muscle tone.
And doing his little bat dance.
Yeah. And everything being labeled and, it's fun.
He was very OCD.
He was, yes. He was the original Howard Hughes. He was a millionaire as well. That'd be a good show to do, Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
But anyway, when the show ended, interest in the comic book also waned. And that's what people fail to remember sometimes, is that Batman was not always as popular as he was now. In fact, at this particular point, we hit a low.
As did Superman at that time.
Yes.
They both kind of...
Because I think, they both fell prey to that thing where... the
culture at the time.
The culture at the time, they had to all be watered down. The adults weren't taking it seriously anymore, and the kids were growing up. Mm-hmm. So everything had just become this weird, campy joke. So how do you recover from that?
Yeah.
I think something great happened with DC. And I think this is the case not just in this scenario, but with a lot of different creative ventures, is that when you're at the end of the rope and there's nowhere left to go except bankruptcy, sometimes the greatest creative choices come out of that because you just go, well, I got nothing left to lose. Let's just do it. Let's just do it this way and see if it works. If it doesn't work, we're going to go bankrupt anyway.
Yeah.
So they got Denny O'Neil, the great writer of comics, and Neil Adams, one of the all-time great comic book artists, to revive Batman and go back to his darker roots. They also, after 4 years, you said before, brought back the Joker in full homicidal glory. And Batman number 251. And very beautiful, memorable cover. If you've ever seen that cover with the art by Neil Adams, great piece. And also you had Steve Englehart, who came along after Denny O'Neil, who continued this trend of bringing both Batman, the Joker, and really all of Batman's rogue galleries back into the dark world in which they belong, away from the 60s camp. Though, as I said before, that can be fun. And then rolling on in through the 70s into the 80s, that's when you got Alan Moore and The Killing Joke. One of my all-time favorites. If I had it within arm's reach, I would hold it up because I think it is a magnificent graphic novel, which, unlike some of the 80s graphic novels, I think has always been canon. I mean, some of the graphic novels from that time period were sort of in their own alternate universe.
Yeah.
But I think this story by Alan Moore, who is really funny, because Alan Moore, he'll write these all-time great comic book stories, and then he'll turn around and say, well, that was just something I wrote. I can't do Alan Moore per se. That's just something I did on it. I'll do it like John Lennon. Well, it's just something I did on an afternoon. And he acts like, well, it's no big deal. I was like, dude, it's one of the all-time greatest graphic novels. And to this day, he's like, oh, Killing Joke, it was okay, I guess. But what The Killing Joke is, essentially, is the story of the Joker trying to drive Jim Gordon crazy to prove that even the best people can be driven into insanity like he was. And throughout the story, we see flashbacks to a young man who was a failed comedian, whose wife was pregnant, down on his luck, and he is hired kind of unwittingly because he needs the money for his family, his growing family. He's hired to show them through, to guide these two criminals, gangsters, through a chemical plant where he used to work toward a playing card manufacturing company on the other side that they're going to rob. So what happens is before the heist goes down, the guy's wife dies in a freak electrical accident, basically with, I think it was an appliance of some kind. She's electrocuted. Her and her child in her womb are just gone like that. So he loses all hope for continuing. And the gangsters come and they're like, okay, we're doing the thing tonight. He's like, I don't have any purpose. Why would I do this? The whole point of this was to get money for my family. Like, why would I? And they basically threaten him, his life. And he has to go and do it. And they stick the red hood, going back to Bill Finger's story, on his head. And they say, we always rob places, and one of the people wears the red hood. So it creates the illusion that the red hood is one guy, when actually it's any member of the gang. So this time, we're going to stick the red hood on you. And so as he's leading through the thing, Batman shows up. Scared, the guy runs to a catwalk, jumps over the railing. The two gangsters get shot, actually, by the cops and killed gruesomely. And he falls into it. And so the Red Hood, the innocent failed comedian, falls into the chemicals, is washed away, takes off the hood, and finds that his face has been bleached white. And in that moment, snaps and loses his mind and becomes the Joker. I've always been fond of that story because I like as a writer, I like the idea of a character arc that goes wide. I like the idea of a guy who should never have been the Joker becoming the Joker. For me, if it's a gangster who just got a little crazier, it's not that impactful.
Yeah.
But if it was a guy who was down on his luck, who through happenstance and cruel fate was driven nuts, and then the icing on the cake is now he's permanently deformed by these chemicals, that to me is an affecting story. Now, what's interesting too is in that story, The Killing Joke, at the end of it, as the Joker is leading Batman through a funhouse of terrors, the Joker himself says that he's not entirely sure that that's actually how it happened. He says, in terms of his origin, he says that if he's going to have a past, he prefers it to be multiple choice. So he leaves you that mysterious little hook to say, well, just because you saw this doesn't necessarily mean that's how he came about.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that, rather than having a definitive origin. But I do like that idea of the failed comedian origin. And I don't know if the new Joaquin Phoenix movie is playing on that or not. It seems like it's pretty close to that, in so much as he's a failed comedian, and you see he's kind of a normal guy who's disturbed, who's heading downhill. Not going to say too much more about it because not everybody's seen it. But I did want to mention The Killing Joke, one of my all-time favorites. They made it into an animated film recently, which we'll talk about when we get to the animated stuff here. But didn't like the animated one quite as much because it's not really... There are parts in it that go, wait, what's that? Where'd that come from? You could have just done the actual, and it's pretty close, but there are some weird things that they changed that I'm not quite sure about. He also in the 80s killed Jason Todd, that little son of a bitch. Nobody liked Jason Todd in the 80s. They put out in the storyline called A Death in the Family. They put out an 800 number, two of them, I think, or maybe it was a 900 number where we had to pay because we all need money. And one of them was, will Jason Todd live or will he die? Because they had a story where Jason Todd is trying to save his mother, who is tied up in a warehouse in some foreign country. And the Joker beats him with a crowbar and then and he has a bomb that's ticking down. And at the end of the issue, the Joker leaves Jason Todd bloodied on the floor. Jason Todd was the second Robin after Dick Grayson. He was a little shit. Yeah. Nobody liked Jason Todd. But which is evidenced in the end of how the story ends. And then they left a 900 number, and they said, if you want Jason to live, dial this number. If you want Jason to die, dial this number.
It's like American Idol, but with Jason Todd.
Right. And can you guess what happened?
Oh, they hated him, so they said die.
He died. He got his ass blown up, and Batman was carrying him out of there, and his mother got blown up too. And it was a pretty affecting story because it was the first time you saw Robin die. Like the Joker, he murked Robin. Yeah. Which made the Joker all the more badass, but also it created a sense of anything could happen. But as generally happens in comic books, they retconned it and now he's alive and he's a grown up and he wears a red hood, all this stuff. And after one of the many crises, they retconned it, right? Which is one of the big reasons I stopped reading a lot of comic books, because there's too many damn crises for me. I can't keep track of what I'm supposed to remember. But and also moving forward into modern days, you can't forget the contributions of someone like Scott Snyder, who wrote the pre-New 52 Batman, and created this whole concept of multiple Jokers, that each Joker was a different person. And I don't know if I'm really into that, but that, Scott Snyder is a great writer for sure. But now I wanted to go a little more in detail about that's sort of the comic book history. Let's talk about the Joker in mass media, in alternate media, in television and film. 66 TV show. We've already mentioned it, but we got to go back there because that's good old Cesar Romero, right? He was named by TV Guide one of the 60 nastiest TV villains of all time. What do you think about that? Was Cesar Romero as the Joker all that nasty, Rebecca? Tell me now.
No.
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 Well, TV Guide certainly thought so. I don't know what their source is. You didn't like Cesar Romero?
It's not that. It's just that show isn't very.
There's nothing nasty about that show, nor the movie, the 66 movie. Yeah. The bat repellent. I always remember, whenever I think of that, I think of Batman running with the bomb that has a little fuse that never seems to end, and he's running down the waterfront, and he looks down, he sees the ducks swimming by, and he's like, oh, I can't throw it in there because Batman would never kill ducklings. And he runs down there. And that's the moment, that and the shark repellent with the rubber shark on his leg. But no, definitely not nasty.
No.
And he was kind of manic. If you've ever seen Cesar Romero, I think he did a pretty good job acting-wise, honestly, because he wasn't very Cesar Romero-y. He wasn't like giving you come hither looks.
No,
no. And he seemed to take it somewhat seriously, in so much
exception of he wouldn't
save the mustache.
The mustache, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, and so what always got me is they just put the paint on top of the mustache instead of saying Joker has a mustache, and maybe making it green or something. They just put it on top, so it's clearly a mustache underneath the paint, which is kind of odd. Is Joker hiding his stash, or what? Is he not proud of it? If I was them, I would have just leaned into that and just given him a green mustache. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah.
At least it would make a little more sense.
Yes. But
we've talked about Caesar prior, and there are many other incarnations of Joker we need to hit on that we haven't talked about yet. Jack Nicholson, 1989, Batman, directed by Tim Burton.
Yes.
This was a film that actually had a backstory for the Joker, a definitive backstory, which a lot of people thought was the backstory from the comic book because it was in the movie, so it must be, but it wasn't. There was no Jack Napier in the comic book. That was created for the movie and was also carried over into the animated show. That he was a gangster named Napier, and then he was trying to rob Axis Chemicals, and he in the movie tries to shoot Batman. Batman does this like Wonder Woman, like Linda Carter thing, and bounces the bullet back at his face.
But you can't move your neck when you're doing it.
Right, because I can't. It's like you have to think of like what was the hot dog?
Yeah.
But so he falls over the railing, and Batman catches him, but can't hold him. Because Michael Keaton didn't do his push-ups that day.
That's right. Or maybe he did too many arm workouts and his muscles were just burned out.
So weak that he dropped Jack Nicholson.
Or maybe Jack Nicholson just had a lot of hot dogs that day.
Jack Nicholson had a slight paunch in the movie, but he was a middle-aged man. And so he falls down into this really super green chemical, which I guess is acid. And but color coordinated with his later retirement.
That's right. Yes.
And then his hand comes up like Frankenstein, and he's the Joker, and he has the little purple spot, which I found. You remember when he's talking to Jack Palance, and he comes and he's like, "I'm the Joker,"
Yeah.
And he's got that little purple patch here.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was a mistake. I always thought that was like a bruise. like from where he fell, or something that just healed. But the purple on his jacket rubbed off. The dye of the jacket rubbed off on the white makeup and gave that little purple spot, which I think is kind of a cool little thing, because I always assumed that he just fell off the fucking catwalk, and he just had plastic surgery from probably the worst, basement bargain plastic surgeon in Gotham.
I was going to make a joke about, who.
And then who?
What's his name? The boxing 80s heartthrob.
Sly Stallone.
No, he was in Iron Man. The guy with the
you're talking about Mickey Rourke?
That's it.
Oh my God.
Yes. My brain is not working today.
Speaking of bargain basement plastic surgery. But anyway, there were a lot of people who tested for the Joker. And I'm going to give you some of these names, and I want you to give me don't look at my notes.
Okay, I won't look at them.
Because that's cheating.
Okay.
And then you're going to give me.
I have one that I know of.
Oh, you go first.
That's John Lithgow.
Oh.
He auditioned and turned it down. John
Lithgow as the Joker in Tim Burton's film. That is an interesting.
Off his Harry and the Henderson fame, I guess.
Yeah. And why did he turn it down?
I guess he didn't realize that it was going to be, that big of a deal. I guess because comic book, if you're looking at
1989 too.
Yeah, comic book films up to that time, you just go.
And the only Batman you had up until that time was the TV show.
So he probably was just like, no.
So what do you think of that, John Lithgow as the Joker?
I don't know.
The 80s John Lithgow, like the Brian De Palma John. I can kind of see him in Blowout. John Lithgow, I could see that as the Joker.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so what would you say about that? Would you say that's a good possibility, or no?
Yeah.
And you can be honest if you don't think these people would be good Jokers.
I think he's a good actor. He's a diverse. He's just not always cornball and comedy.
Unless he's singing to children.
That's right.
Okay, here's one for you. Mm-hmm. Tim Curry.
Later on, he's the voice of the Joker in the animated series before they recast.
Yes.
So
he never got to be the Joker.
He never got to be the Joker. I think he would have been interesting.
And this was a year before he played the other clown.
Yes.
So he would have been on like a clown rampage.
That's right. Maybe that's why he did it. He's like, by God, I'm going to be a murderous clown.
In 2 movies back to back. David Bowie. Did you know that he was approached?
I did not.
He was approached by Tim Burton to be the Joker. Think of that. 80s David Bowie.
I want him to. Would they have turned it into a musical like Labyrinth?
If only.
Well, they would have had the soundtrack.
They would have had the boot Prince.
No Prince.
Yeah,
it's going to be the David Bowie Batman soundtrack.
Gotham City.
Yes, that's right. In the underground. Okay.
I move the stars from no one.
That's right.
So I don't know. David Bowie is kind of fascinating as the Joker.
Yeah, that would have been. Yeah.
Okay, I got another one. James Woods was approached by Tim Burton. Mm-hmm. That's a no, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you liked all of them up until James Woods. Mm-hmm. Okay, well
But James Wood kind of, not a big.
I understand. You don't have to like them all. That's cool.
Okay.
Jack Nicholson, though, was the number one choice of Tim Burton and the producers all along, even though Robin Williams lobbied hard.
Yeah, I remember that. And then later on, I guess they came back and were like, hey.
What I heard, and I don't know how true this is that they kind of used Robin Williams a little bit to get Jack Nicholson. Yeah, they said, well, Jack, we're offering you this great deal, but Robin Williams really wants the part, so we're gonna have to start shooting. And then Jack was like, "Okay, I'm gonna take that deal." You know what the deal was? $6 million up front, which is pretty good for 1989.
He got back end, didn't he?
And a percentage of back end and merchandising.
Good choice.
Now, the estimation of how much Jack Nicholson made off Tim Burton's Batman from merchandising alone is about $80 to $90 million.
He took the Alec Guinness route.
He made a good choice. So good a choice, in fact, that when his buddy Danny DeVito was being approached for the Penguin, which, of course, who else are you going to get for the Penguin? He told him, he said, Danny, you need to get back in, get that marketing money. And Danny DeVito took his advice. And I'm sure cried all the way to the bank. What I really loved about the makeup, which is unusual in the Tim Burton one, is that he has a permanent rictus grin. Mm-hmm. There is no frowning. This is the only time, even in the comic books, when you see the Joker unable to frown. I like that. It's very Tim Burton-y. Like, you can imagine that coming out of the mind of Beetlejuice dude, you know, who has his own character designs and stuff. And I love seeing some of the little sketches Burton does for things, you know. That always has stuck with me. And that is something that is completely unique just to the Jack Nicholson Joker, is the permanent grin, which in and of itself is kind of terrifying because he's always smiling.
Yeah.
There's just something scary about a guy that cannot not smile. And especially when he's murdering mass groups of people, because he is a homicidal maniac in Tim Burton's movie.
Yeah.
He tries to take out all of Gotham during the world's craziest fucking parade. And the bit that they cut out of the movie is he's throwing money to the people, you know, as Prince is getting down, you know, not dancing on stage, but singing. And but Jack is dancing. And he's throwing money to people, and they cut a little scene out where the guy grabs it and looks at the money, and it's the Joker's name on the money, on the $100 bill. So, you know, he's not even giving them money. He's giving them forged money with his own face on it, just to lure them out and murder them in mass.
That's right.
Which makes it even more disturbing in a way. But Jack Nicholson. So, I mean, you know, what can you say? That's just an all-timer. Maybe because of my age. Maybe because I saw it in theaters. It has always stuck with me. And Jack Nicholson has a special place in my heart as the Joker.
Yes.
It was probably so indelible that, you know, there was no other live-action version of the Joker for many, many years. But there was the Batman animated series in 1992, which, as you said, Tim Curry was the original voice of the Joker in that series. Have you ever heard his voice on the Joker?
I have not.
Because I would like to. I've actually tried to look that up before. I would love to hear.
As well, and I haven't.
Maybe
I'm not looking in the right spot. So if you guys know where that is, put it in the comments,
please. But who, I know you're going to know this, who took over for Tim Curry after the fact?
Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill. And according to a Mark Hamill interview I heard one time, he actually, Curry had done some of the recording and they had animated it to his voice. So the first few episodes, Mark Hamill had to dub a voice that was already animated.
Yes.
Whereas later, once they knew he was going to be the Joker from here on out, you know, they animated it to his own thing, his expression, his voice and stuff. So, but he was, I mean, what can you say about Mark Hamill as the Joker? Plenty, I'm sure.
Yes, I love him as the Joker.
He is a great Joker.
That's what really got me into it. With the animated series was just a well-written,
unbelievable.
It just was, you know, and all the Rogues Gallery and the fact that they actually showed Arkham Asylum, because I don't even remember, you know, and stuff before Arkham. No. You know, stuff that was available to me.
That's right, because it wasn't in the Batman movie.
No.
It wasn't in the 66.
No.
And it was just in the comics.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and of course, my age, you know, I wasn't getting those, you know, if I got a comic, it was like Wonder Woman or, you know, the more, you know, Superman.
Yeah. And then you had, like you were saying, the scripts for these things were really like written like little dramas.
Yes.
They weren't kiddie, and it was dark.
Yeah.
And the art and everything. Remember how the episode used to come up with like a little tableau, and it would have the credits on it and the title of the episode? Yeah. I love that.
The art was wonderful. Particularly, I love, you know, Mask of the Phantasm. The
movie.
Film. Yeah. The animated series film, which featured the Joker.
And Mark Hamill as the Joker. Because there would be future animated Jokers that were not Mark Hamill.
Yes.
But in the animated series.
Yes. And then that came out, I think, was it December of 93, I believe. And then the 93-94 season of animated series, they bring on Harley Quinn.
Now, tell me a little bit about Harley Quinn, because that character is tied irreparably to the Joker.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, she's the psychiatrist, but she's thinking, hey, I can write a tell-all and make bank. And so she's like, I'll use him, but he knows how to manipulate her.
Dr. Harleen Quinzel?
Dr. Harleen Quinzel, yes. And so he manipulates her, and then she falls in love with her patient and goes cuckoo bird and busts him out. Is the story they tell in a later issue called Mad Love, which would come out years later. Because when the animated series was going on, Harley Quinn was not in the comic books.
No.
She would not appear in the comic books. Not the official DC until 2000.
Yeah, it was a long
like
time.
99, 2000.
Because she appeared on the show in the early 90s.
But her first appearance was in the Batman the Animated Series comic books, which were the Fox Kids Club comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was a cool issue. But yeah, she was actually based on a college friend of Paul Dini.
Paul Dini.
Dini. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And her name was Arlene Sorkin, who would later voice Harley Quinn for years. She was a college friend of his, and she inspired it. She was on a soap opera called Days of Our Lives, and you can actually find the clip on YouTube of her as a clown on Days of Our Lives being silly. And I think that was kind of what cemented his,
Yeah, you showed it to me just before we went on, and it's very Harley Quinn. I would suggest you look it up because it is a neat little piece of Batman trivia.
But yeah, before she was Harley Quinn, she was on Days of Our Lives, and then America's Funniest People with Dave Goulet, which was a terrible show, I thought. If you liked it, good for you, but I was not a big fan. But yeah, that's what she did before. Her friend Paul was like, yeah, I'm creating a character based off of you. So she did the voice of her. And I think her and Mark Hamill, vocal chemistry, I guess you would call it.
They gelled. Yeah,
it really gelled. The comedy in it. Because I remember the first episode I saw her in, she was just like a little bit character. And then the episode that I saw, and it really was like, oh my God, this is hilarious, was around it was probably about May of '94, and it was called Harley Quinnade. And that one, I just thought it was hysterical. She has a song she sings, and it was just, and that's what got me hooked on the character. And I mean, I already liked the Joker because I'd seen Mask of the Phantasm, the Christmas before. So I just really loved the animated series. I mean, there really wasn't a comic book cartoon quite like that. I think before then you were like, oh, X-Men, man, that's a really good cartoon. And then that hit, and you were like, oh wow, yeah, this is. Yeah,
it was like dark little movies.
Yes,
it was something to look forward to, that original animated series. Now the animation nor the quality continued in further incarnations.
No, yeah, the animated series was the best animation for the Joker. Batman and Robin, it was still pretty good. But then when they did the Batman Superman Adventure Hour on WB, I call it the Triangle Head Joker with 2 dots. That's when they did the adaptation of Mad Love. Mm-hmm. And I love the episode, but the Joker's animation was I just didn't like it.
It didn't look good. The triangle head was very weird.
No, because everyone else still kind of the same from Batman and Robin, but his was like triangle face man.
Was that still Hamill?
Yes, it was still Hamill at that point.
Okay, because then Hamill left, and then he eventually came back for the Killing Joke animated film.
Yeah, because Hamill stayed through the video games, the Arkham Asylum, and then Arlene Sorkin was there through most of that, and then she left, and they have a new one.
Well, Harley Quinn did not appear in the movies for quite some time. Mm-hmm. She did appear, as you said, in the comic book in the early 2000s. Eventually, the character of the Joker returned in live action in 2008 in The Dark Knight. Heath Ledger was cast famously. At the time, I think it was a little controversial because he was hot off of Brokeback Mountain. He was an Academy Award nominee. But people were like, oh, really? Heath Ledger? I remember this. I mean, people want to forget, but I do remember this. There was a lot of eyebrows being raised when his name was mentioned, even though he did always have that big smile, a very distinctive kind of smile. Now he actually auditioned for Batman. That's true. For Batman Begins. He turned it down, didn't he? He didn't want to be in a comic book movie because I think he was thinking more of the Batman had been the Joel Schumacher. Yeah, Joel Schumacher had been pumping those out. And though Chris Nolan had done the 2 movies, well, really 3, following Memento and Insomnia, he was not Chris Nolan like we think of him now. Really the Batman movies brought him to the fore in a big way because they were so successful. So I think what happened was Heath Ledger saw Batman Begins and how serious it was being taken, and that's what kind of got him. And he lobbied hard for the Joker. Like, he's like, I don't want to play Batman, but when you do the sequel, Joker. You know? And he based his version, Ledger based his version on The Killing Joke and on a graphic novel called Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious Earth, which is a little bit of it's a little more of an obscure graphic novel, but it's from the 80s. It has some really wild art in it. He also kept a journal, Ledger did. He locked himself away in a hotel room, and he would keep a journal writing as the Joker. And he would use this time in isolation to think about the character and then write his thoughts for what the journal would be. And later on, actually, I think his father published that. You can buy the journal, which is very creepy because it's like a collage type deal. It's a crazy person doing a collage with writing and like weird poetry. And like, I remember the last page is like this really creepy looking thing. And the word bye is written across it, and the final page. He took it very seriously. The problem I have, though, is this whole idea, and I've heard this before, that Heath Ledger played the Joker, went crazy, and killed himself. That's not true. I mean, that he died of an accidental prescription overdose, and he was sick. He was already working on another movie. He totally completed The Dark Knight. Everything was done in regards to that movie. He was working on a movie called The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus with Terry Gilliam, who he had worked with before on The Brothers Grimm over in London. He had gotten sick because they were doing a lot of night shoots in the cold and rain, and his immune system was down. And as is generally the case with people who can sometimes get prescriptions from different doctors, he didn't realize how they mixed and accidentally overdosed. I think it's a little bit of, it's always kind of creepy when people go, well, he played the Joker, went crazy and killed himself. I mean, he didn't go crazy. He played a good character, but it didn't drive him crazy. You know what I mean? So that's always kind of gotten me. The interpretation of the Joker in Nolan's, in terms of his background, is very much like The Killing Joke, in so much as he literally gives multiple choices for his past. He tells the story a couple different ways to different people, and it's a different story about how he got the scars on his face. They also wanted to portray him more as an agent of chaos and less as the clown prince of crime. So he's a little bit more like a controlled, I guess, psychotic, you might say. They refer to it at one point the clown makeup is his version of war paint, like psychological warfare to scare you before he kills you, which he does kill several people in that movie. I remember seeing that movie, The Dark Knight, in the theater with little kids sitting behind me. And they sounded kind of traumatized at a certain point because it's an intense portrayal. He had another reason why he went so far out, Heath Ledger, is because, did you know he had a pay or play deal? So in other words, what that means in Hollywood terms is when you sign the contract, you're getting paid whether the movie gets made or not. So it's actually a pretty good deal to have.
Yeah.
So he decided, since he has the security of a pay or play deal, I'm just going to go all out. I'm going to do the kind of performance that an actor would get fired for. That's how much I'm going to do for this. And so taking that approach to it, he went, to the next level of weird and kind of crazy with it. He died after the film was completed, but before it was released. I remember when he died, seeing that and going, this is really weird. Because I had just come back from LA. The actor Brad Renfro had just died of an overdose. And then, like, literally a few days later, I look and, everybody's talking about The Dark Knight. Everyone loved the Batman Begins. They can't wait to see what the Joker's going to be like. And then suddenly, boom, article pops up, Heath Ledger is dead. And you're like, what? The star of this movie that we're all waiting for? It was just very strange. You know what I mean? I really enjoy the film. I know you're not the biggest fan of it. It's not your Batman, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like
which I usually get shoes thrown at me because I.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's not a popular opinion.
But that's all right. That's all right. Where I stand on it.
Yes.
I would rather see an artist take it in a serious direction than the Joel Schumacher.
Oh, well, yeah.
or something like that. Because I think what happened, the cool thing happened to comic book movies in general around this time. And I'm certainly not saying it's because of Chris Nolan, but I think he had a part in it. Is that suddenly you started seeing people stop treating it like it was stupid.
Yeah.
And for children.
Yeah.
And then really take seriously.
Which I feel like Burton did, and then that's why they kicked him off after, well, you know, because of the return, you know, Batman Returns and the Happy Meal toys and parents getting upset.
Because I think that those movies prove the merchandising make more than the movie.
Yeah.
Ultimately, which Jack Nicholson appreciated.
Yes.
And so you know, I think that there was this like ill effect that rippled from the first Burton Batman on through the 90s for a while, is that the movie started to get made for the merchandising.
Yeah. But that was never his intention.
No, that was something
he wanted to make a, you know.
Yeah. Even though, I'll say this about Tim Burton. Have you ever seen the thing where it's like Death of Superman?
Yes, the documentary? Yes.
Tim Burton can get a little snarky about comic book stuff.
Yes.
He makes fun of it and talks about how stupid it is.
He's not a fan.
He's not a fan. But he did, I think, try to do artistically something pretty radical with his two Batman movies. Maybe a little too radical with Batman Returns. So radical that the studio he made so much money for said, we don't want you back. Because you scared kids with that one. What was all that black shit coming out of his mouth? You did that on purpose.
But kids loved the first RoboCop movie.
Yeah, and they love, and as I recall, they love Batman Returns.
Yes.
There were some Donahue shows where the fucking sour grape parents were up there, but for the most part, I remember kids buying and eating that shit up.
Yep.
But
I was at the McDonald's getting that Happy Meal toy.
You know how it is. Nobody can have fun anymore.
No.
Everybody's got to create a protest about it. So I'm surprised these new ones aren't too violent. People aren't protesting about. Actually, they kind of are, aren't they? What am I saying? Suicide Squad, 2016. Jared Leto. Not so long it's been since Heath Ledger. They already got a new Joker in the DCEU. And it's Jared Leto. And Harley Quinn for the first time in a live-action motion picture played by Margot Robbie, who we both enjoyed as Sharon Tate in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes, yeah.
What do you think of her as Harley Quinn? You prefer the cartoon version, don't you?
I do. I love Arlene Sorkin. I know people say
you will not be satisfied until she plays
That's right. Even in her 60s. I want to see a 62-year-old Harley Quinn.
In Daisy Dukes.
That's right. Well, that's what someone told me once. They said, well, Rebecca, she can't wear that outfit in a movie. It'll look ridiculous. The cartoon. I'm like, I get it. But does she have to look like a Hot Topic?
A Harley chick?
Hoochie?
Yeah, she does kind of look like a Harley. Like she should be hanging off a hog.
She's kind of hoochie-ish.
Uh-huh. Well,
no offense to the hoochies, but she was a psychiatrist. I mean, yeah, she cheated her way to being a psychiatrist, according to, the Harley I loved, but still, I mean, I know she cuckoo bird and she loves a crazy man, but I mean, I don't know.
Well, a lot of this movie, Suicide Squad, was reshot. It fell victim to the thing of like, okay, after a certain point, they were, Zack Snyder tried to go dark with the DC movies, which fine, that's fine. It's like Superman, like you were saying, it's not my Superman.
Yeah.
But that's fine. If you want to do that, I know younger people nowadays like darker stuff. I think you would have had a better contrast if you had a light Superman against the dark Batman, but I don't think they planned ahead for Batman versus Superman.
I don't think they planned ahead for anything. They just said, we want an Avengers movie. We want an Avengers for DC. Let's just get to it.
As quickly as possible.
Yes.
And we all know how that turned out. But before that turned out so badly, you had Suicide Squad that was...
the movie.
It was not a very good movie.
That maybe if she had been in a better movie, maybe I would have enjoyed her, but I just didn't.
Well, part of the problem in the movie, though, is, like I was saying, they reshot it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want it to be dark. Because at this point, they were trying to go away from the Zack Snyder thing. They hired the guy who did Training Day to do Suicide Squad and then told him it's too dark. And so they reshot it.
Don't you love Hollywood?
I do.
Executives.
They really.
They always seem to get it wrong.
Always. but you can never tell them.
No.
They always.
That's what I don't understand. I'm like, did you not learn your lesson?
Well, I'll tell you how bad this was. The trailer came out for Suicide Squad. You remember when that trailer came out? It was a huge hit. So you know what the executive said? They said, recut the movie to make it more like the trailer. Think about that. The trailer came out, and it was a big hit. So you recut the movie to be more like the trailer. Huh? That's so fucking stupid. The approach they decided to use for Jared Leto was as a modern-day crime boss. He's all tatted up. That was actually David Ayer's idea, was to have him all tatted up. That was not Jared Leto. Jared Leto kind of thought of him as a 1920s gangster.
Yeah.
And so they kind of brought him into more of a modern thing with the grill and all that was added later because he has silver teeth.
I mean, I'm not surprised all the merchandise and all the clothing hit Hot Topic.
And it was a successful movie money-wise.
Yeah.
Not creatively, certainly not critically. And sitting there watching it, I cringed a lot because you could clearly see, you can almost see the cut marks where they put like a funny button line at the end of every scene, which you don't need a funny button line at the end of every single scene because half of them kind of fall like lead weights.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard for me to judge his performance because most of Jared Leto wound up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, that's what I was like, well, where the hell is he?
Yeah,
they made such a big deal about this.
And he's filmed a lot of stuff for the movie. And I don't think he was not happy, I don't think. I don't want to put words in Jared Leto's mouth, but I think he went to see the movie and was like, where's all the shit I shot for it? Because he's not really in it. And it was admitted later that most of it was cut out.
I remember the first time I saw it, I was very confused. I was just like, that's it? That's all he's in?
So for me, it's such a muddled up mess of an edit that it's hard for me to judge his performance.
Do you think they'll ever come out with a director's cut? All the stuff that was...
I don't know. Well, maybe.
I mean, they did it with, Alien 3.
They did. And they've even released whole movies that were shot and then scrapped. Because remember when they did The Exorcist, the prequel? Yeah. They put the one out, it bombed, and they're like, maybe we'll make some more money. Let's put the other one out. We spent money on it. We paid for it. Well, I don't think they'll necessarily do that with Suicide Squad. I don't know. It's a possibility. They're already remaking it. Or I think it's a soft reboot, whatever that means. The Guardians of the Galaxy guy, your best friend, he's going to be in it.
Oh, okay.
James Gunn, he's not going to be in it. He's directing it.
Okay.
So they were like, we want to make Suicide Squad like Guardians. So we're going to get the Guardians guy to do it. Makes sense. But anyway, so that was sort of my overall opinion of Jared Leto as the Joker. It's hard for me to say because he's hardly in the movie. He could have been great. I don't know. Give me a couple more scenes. I don't know.
That whole movie confused me.
And
it's just confusing.
I think as an actor, he's good. I feel like Jared Leto. Dallas Buyers Club.
Blade Runner.
Yes, Blade Runner. Very good. We agree on that for sure.
And I thought I didn't like Jared Leto.
Yeah, and I do. I admire him. He's done a lot of...
But then that was just coming off Suicide Squad.
Right.
Thinking, what the hell is going on here?
Well, think of all these character actors who have played the Joker. Jared Leto is a character actor. Heath Ledger. And now we have another modern, very well-respected character actor, Joaquin Phoenix.
Johnny Cash.
No. Joaquin Phoenix.
Sorry.
Playing the Joker in this year's, the one that opened yesterday, entitled, creatively, Joker. Like I said, we can't really talk much about it because it just came out, so why would we talk about it at this point? We might do a show later where we get more in-depth in it. He's a guy, it's set in 1981, and he plays a guy named Arthur Fleck, a failing comedian whose mother is dying. And that's about as far into the plot as I'm going to get. Robert De Niro is in it, playing a character that is kind of a takeoff of the King of Comedy. He's sort of like the Jerry Lewis character in King of Comedy. And Joaquin Phoenix.
Johnny Carson curtains.
Yeah. And Joaquin Phoenix is sort of like the character that he played. It's that part's kind of interesting. And then, of course, there's the Martin Scorsese connection because he directed King of Comedy. He's producing this movie. Also a Taxi Driver sort of influence in the new Joker. It's definitely about a man who falls apart. But beyond that, I would love to hear what you guys thought of the film. Try to keep the spoilers to a minimum for people who haven't seen it, because, like I said, it did just come out yesterday. So of all the film versions, I know obviously Mark Hamill is your favorite when it comes to animated. Yes. I mean, really, honestly, I know other people did the voice in animated world, but when I think of the animated Joker, I just think of Mark Hamill. And that's
probably animated series. Not, I mean, his voice, yes, throughout the WB times, Return of the Joker, all that, but the animation started to suffer.
But that's the only Joker I think of in animation.
Yeah.
And like I say, that's no disrespect to the other people who did the Joker. I'm just saying that for me, when I think of animated, I think so. That's not really what I was going to talk about. What I want to talk about was of the live action Jokers. Who was your personal favorite interpretations? Because this is, let me just say this before you say though, because I think the interesting thing about the Joker that is not necessarily the case for other characters that have been reinterpreted is you can actually have your favorite interpretation of the Joker. Each one is very different than the last. I personally like that because I don't want to see the same shit over and over and over again. It's like Spider-Man, kind of my problem with that is we did 2 Spider-Mans. They're kind of the same. They're not that far apart. So I don't want to see the same Spider-Man again. Maybe it's just me getting older and I've just seen a lot of movies. But at this point, I'm like, show me something different.
Well, they should do an older Spider-Man story. I want to see him older.
Well, maybe they will. If they stick with if they stick with this kid, he'll be older pretty soon.
Just like I would love to see an older Batman.
Oh, Batman Beyond sort of thing?
Yeah, bring back Michael Keaton. And he can be older Batman.
Well, let's get to the answer of this question because we are out of time.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, of the live action versions of the Joker, which was your favorite interpretation from
I'm picking this because it's of my generation. Okay. It's going to be Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Because that's what I grew up with as a kid and then going into animated series, which was
a takeoff of that sort. Yeah. Okay, I understand that completely because Jack was the Joker for so long.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when the Heath Ledger one came out, it was like, at that point, now there have been several others, so you kind of lose track of this. But there had been no other Joker.
Yeah.
So when you thought of the Joker, it was Jack Nicholson. I'm sure that must have been intimidating for Heath Ledger coming into it. Of course, he did his own thing with it, obviously. Let us know your version of the Joker. Which live-action Joker did you like the best?
Or any Joker.
Any Joker. Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
Hit us up. Let us know. And until next time, take care of yourselves, yeah?